The last time that Nino Mori and I made a video on a car was back in March, at the beginning, early March, at the beginning of the pandemic. And who would have thought that now in October we are still in this situation, and now actually, so Europe is at the beginning of a second wave. So anyway, as long as we can still travel, let's capture this opportunity and have a discussion with Nino on the topic of carbon emission reduction. Let's get started. So Nino, what's the latest in terms of carbon reduction in the automotive industry?
When we last spoke, a couple of front runner OEMs had already published their carbon strategy. Since then, every major OEM has basically done the same, and we're now looking at a huge importance of scope 3 upstream, which is the procurement portion of the carbon emission strategy, to achieve everyone's target. And I think this is now a critical time actually to use this momentum and basically define what this means over the next couple of years together with the largest suppliers in the automotive industry. Christian, we believe that there is 10 steps actually to achieve a good carbon strategy and to get started. And what is most important, I believe, also I think in our conversations with our clients, to from an OEM perspective give the suppliers a guidance on where to go. First, it's all about setting your priorities straight, doing a kind of a health check really, and understanding where the priorities and where the efforts need to be. Second, and we have talked about this a little bit, it's about getting transparency and setting ambitious targets for your suppliers. Transparency, this means not just from a spend perspective, but really going into the actual parts of the car and achieving a two-way set of transparency around the component group and raw material, but also from a supplier perspective to really draw that heat map and understand which suppliers are the heavy impactors in your ecosystem. Second, it's about setting targets. You need to understand whether you want to just comply, compete, or actually lead the pack. And this is not a question for OEMs only. It's equally a question for tier 1 suppliers. What is then, I think, critically important is to think about strategic choices. Reducing carbon footprint and saving cost is not at all competing objectives. There is a lot of areas where there is convergence of objectives, and this would be looking at new product architecture and CO2 optimized designs. This is the kind of strategic choices in your products, but also in your value chain. So how do you want to set up your manufacturing network? How close do you want your suppliers to be? And what are options to reduce carbon footprint in the entire value chain? Once you have done those couple of critical decisions, let's look at what are the actual kind of supplier engagement strategies that you need to have. There is one component around measures. So what are the right measures your supply base from an OEM perspective or from a tier 1 perspective you need to have? This can be around logistics, this can be around raw materials, this can be about product design, this can be about a couple of things. It's important to have a business case library in place that is quantified and ready to deploy. But this is not all when you look at those supply engagements. It's critical, and we see this more and more now after this phase of big announcement, to have a follow-up communication strategy in place to guide your supply base on what to do and where to focus on. Then we need to look at ecosystem action. And here, when we talk about ecosystem action, it's about building a coalition of the willing within your supply chain and working with showcase partners, but at the same time working with your competitors to drive an industry standard forward. It's actually quite interesting, but neutral parties like TÜV or other certification agencies can help in this process. And finally, this is step 10, it's about setting your organization and governance right. What we recommend here, Christian, is to think at it from two ways. You need to have somebody enabling the procurement department, the buyers, yeah, and you need to have the buyers who remain the single point of contact to the supplier, and actually optimize the whole set of KPIs from cost to CO2 to quality to supply continuity. This enabling team, yeah, doesn't need to be huge in terms of numbers. It needs to be effective, and it needs to cover all of the things I've mentioned in such a way that buyers can basically work with a toolbox to guide and enable their suppliers reaching those targets.
Mm. Well, I mean, this is pretty impressive. I think it's, first of all, it's a super comprehensive approach, and I also admire you so that you can keep 10 steps in your memory. But anyway, so I mean, now I mean, all of this is very much from a OEM perspective. Do you also have a recommendation for suppliers of what they can do immediately to get on this carbon reduction train right away?
That's a fair question. I think as a tier 1 supplier or an automotive supplier, ask yourself, yeah, where do I want to be? Do I want to lead the pack, or do I just want to compete? And our recommendation is to lead, because what you will see is that OEMs will look at this from an award perspective, and you can now define whether you will be super competitive in the future or whether you will just be one of many who have sort of a competing mindset. Approach your OEM and work together, because those measures that optimize both cost and CO2 footprint, they can only be defined together. You as a supplier, you have the knowledge, the power, the deep understanding of your raw materials, of your processes. The OEM can help you guide this and actually share some knowledge, but you need to be in charge and you need to be proactive.
Thank you, Nino. So as usual, so I will leave your contact details in the description down below, so that our viewers can reach out directly to you should they have a question. And I promise that either Nino or I will get back to you within 24 hours, and maybe, if useful, we may even respond with another dedicated video.
Sounds
Thank you
great.
for watching.
Thank you for watching.
See you in the next one. Bye.